Hello, the subject tonight is Shakespeare on Shelley. I've had a fascination about Shakespeare, the greatest dramatist of the English language, his stories told through his plays and poems, and his life and times ever since reading my mother's childhood Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare by Charles and Mary Lamb. When I was still at primary school, I read the stories under the covers by torchlight, while secretly listening to the pirate radio ships Caroline and London, broadcasting off the Essex coast at Frinton. As You Like It became a great favourite. This interest in Shakespeare has lasted all my life, and it is 405 years from his death on the 23rd of April, 1616. I have seen all the 39 plays in the canon, together with a number of others where scenes are attributed to his pen. I also collect illustrated volumes of the plays and sonnets. This love of Shakespeare has been augmented by my other love, collecting Shelley pottery. With the help of many other Shelley and Wildman fanatics, I would like to share with you examples of Shakespeare-related pots from our collections. William Shakespeare was born on or around the 23rd of April, 1564. He was the oldest of a large family of siblings. His father, John Shakespeare, was an alderman and bailiff of Stratford-upon-Avon, and his mother, Mary Arden, was a well-off heiress of a branch of the Roman Catholic Arden family of Warwickshire, who had half shares in her family home at Wilmcote. John Shakespeare came from a large extended family of farmers and smaller landowners who had lived in the Warwickshire area for several hundred years. John was a glover, a manufacturer of kid leather gloves, a greatly sought after commodity by the fashionable and well-off middle classes throughout England. John also made and lost great deals of money from illegal dealings in wool, which was then a government-controlled industry and trade. William had an excellent education at Stratford Petty School and then the Free Grammar School, learning history, Latin and Greek by rote. He was introduced to many of the future themes of his plays from reading Ovid and other classical scholars. He also learnt about folklore, family law and British mythology from his family at home. He was an avid reader, and some of his relatives and friends wrote some of the famous historical texts of the period, from which he would eventually draw themes for his plays. He fell in love and married very hastily on the 3rd of November 1582, Anne Hathaway, whose family owned a farm cottage nearby in Shottery. He was 18 and she was 26, pregnant with their first child, Suzanne, born in May 1583. By this time, John Shakespeare was a ruined man financially, and the Shakespeare boys had to give up furthering their education. William, now married, did not go to university, but joined his father's trade and probably took up some teaching jobs. Meanwhile, the Shakespeare and Arden extended families were often suspected of, or actually involved with, Roman Catholic plots and Jesuit missionaries, attempting to undermine the Protestant government of Elizabeth I. Shakespeare learnt to be very careful at an early age. By 1587, Shakespeare was a member of the Queen's Men, a theatrical company that travelled the length and breadth of England, and quickly gained experience as an actor and playwright. At that time, the theatres of London played to houses of at least 3,000 people, whilst London had a population of approximately 200,000. A play may last only 3 performances or could run for 14. Playgoing was extremely popular, but not with the burghers of the City of London, who were often very puritanical. In the country, turn yards and Guildhall rooms were used for performances, and they were packed. Shakespeare was a prolific playwright and became famous quite quickly. In his own day, Shakespeare had his rivals, detractors and critics who would decry his success. One such, Richard Green, wrote an autobiographical pamphlet which refers to Shakespeare. Green's words drip with envy in describing Shakespeare's playwriting as having a groat's worth of wit. A groat is a small coin worth fourpence. Green calls Shakespeare an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you. And being an absolute Johannes factotum, it is his own conceit that onely Shakespeare is a country. In the UK, the comedian David Mitchell has written a very funny TV situation comedy series called Upstart Crow, with himself playing the character William Shakespeare. The Queen herself and King James from 1603 onwards were also fans of his writing, as well as owning property in London. William invested in land around Stratford and became a partner in the Theatre Company, owning a share of the Globe Theatre in Southwark. Eventually, he bought New Place, the second largest house in Stratford, and had it done up for his wife and family. Shakespeare retired in 1610 and lived on in Stratford at his house, New Place, until his death in 1616, aged 52 years. His death on the 22nd or the 23rd of April, 1616, was followed by burial in the Church of the Holy Trinity in Stratford-upon-Avon, and his standing in the local community can be seen by the memorial in the wall above his tomb. Shakespeare's collected plays were published by his friends in folios in 1616 and again in 1623. Ben Jonson wrote of him, "He was not of an age, but of all time." Shelley produced some souvenirware pictured with Shakespeare-related themes for the booming holiday and day tripper markets at the beginning of the 20th century. Railway trips, cycling, and eventually the motor car brought people to Stratford. This ideal shaped butter dates from about 1916. Even as late as the 1950s, Shelley were using Anne Hathaway's cottage as a subject for one of the series of iconic bucolic buildings, hand-painted, signed, and gilded on the Ripon teaware. This one is signed by Rafe Solomon. William Shakespeare applied to the Royal College of Arms on the 20th of October, 1596, for the right to bear a coat of arms on behalf of his father, John Shakespeare, whom he wished to be recognised as a gentleman. The coat of arms was devised from the college's pattern books, using the depiction of a spear and the motto, chosen by William himself, "Not without right." When the coat of arms was approved, it was only weeks from when William's 11-year-old son, Hamnet, had died and been buried, the last of the male issue of the family. Crested china pieces for the holiday-making market had the family crest of Shakespeare and the crest of Stratford-upon-Avon on a range of models. The earliest piece of Wildman with a Shakespeare connection to so far found is this J.F. Wildman lake scene mug with an illustration of David Garrick's villa at Hampton. One of the leading actors of the day, Garrick, dedicated his Robert Adam designed temple to Shakespeare, pictured here in the foreground on the lawn by the River Thames. In it stood the 1758 life-size marble statue of Shakespeare by Roubiliac, the famous French sculptor of the time. Garrick himself is supposed to have modelled for the statue, which is now in the British Museum, bequeathed to the nation by Garrick in his will. For me, the most wonderful pot in my Shakespeare collection is this moulded Wildman jug of January 1897, China pattern number 5962. It is made in semi-porcelain china rather than heavy earthenware. The outside is blushed in yellows and peach colours, but can be found painted in solid colours with a white motif. According to the pattern books, there is a series of numbers, 5961 to 5964, which probably represents the different colour variations. I've seen it with a deep green background. The obverse is moulded in a relief of the bust of Shakespeare, and on the reverse is a representation of the birthplace house in Henley Street, Stratford-upon-Avon. The form of the handle is very like a Frederick Reed designed jug and bowl toilet set that we once owned, and is how I recognised the jug for what it was 2 rows away at Ali Pali Antique Fair a number of years ago. The jug is similar to one moulded and produced for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897. Under Frederick Reed's art direction at the factory, Wildman produced a whole series of intarsia pottery shapes with illustrations showing scenes from some of the famous plays. We now know who designed the somewhat crude illustrations, as original artwork has been discovered for one of the designs from Much Ado About Nothing, signed by Frederick Reed. On later pots, Shelley added the words copyright to the back stamp. The public had developed a fascination with famous actors and actresses such as Ellen Terry and Sir Herbert Bay-Home-Tree, the pop stars of their day. The illustrations are rather cartoon-like, but have a certain charm. Also, we have a clue to the scene portrayed because there is a reference to it as part of the design. Where the same design has been used on different shapes, there are different pattern numbers. The first recorded Shakespeare illustration is on a jug depicting the popular comic hero Falstaff. Pattern number 3457 states it is Henry IV, Part 1, Falstaff, Act 4. What an intolerable deal of sack to such a pitiful portion of bread. The actual quotation is from Act 2, Scene 4, and is, oh monstrous, but 1/2 penny worth of bread to this intolerable deal of sack. It is said by Prince Henry after reading the sleeping Falstaff's bill for his food and drink at the Boar's Head Tavern, Eastcheap. It was also used to illustrate this biscuit barrel, pattern number 3500. The jug could have been used for beer or water to add to whiskey. This silver rim bowl uses the same illustrations, but does not have a pattern number. The next design, pattern number 3465, depicts a Telby Belch and Malvolio from Twelfth Night. Note for those of you that know the play that Malvolio is not cross-gartered. The next pattern number in the series is 3466, the whiskey jug depicting Glamis Castle and Macbeth. The jug states that the quote is from Act 5, Scene 8, although Scene 7 is more accurate. Of all men else I have avoided thee. Macbeth is about to face his final confrontation with his revenging nemesis, Macduff. Macbeth had been given an enchanted life, so he could not be killed by anyone born of woman. But Macduff, whose wife and children Macbeth has had killed, had been untimely cut from his mother's womb by caesarean, so was able to confront and kill Macbeth. The next is a handled bottle vase with Hamlet on one side and Elsinore Castle on the reverse, pattern number 3467. The scene is from the last act, Act 5, Scene 2. Hamlet has returned to the court to confront his mother and uncle, who is now his stepfather and has usurped the throne to become king. He is greeted by Osric, a flamboyant courtier, and Hamlet makes fun of him by asking his friend Horatio, "Dost know this waterfly?" It has been suggested that this image is of Osric, not Hamlet. The next play depicted is Much Ado About Nothing. This covered jar shows pattern number 3468, with the comic watchman from Act 3, Scene 3, challenging the good Duke's evil brothers' men with the quote, first watchman, "We charge you in the prince's name, stand." On the reverse is a later scene from Act 4, Scene 2, showing the stupid Dogberry, who leads the watchman, commanding Dogberry, "Yet forget not I am an ass." The quoted reference is again incorrect, stating it is Act 6, Scene 1. These scenes were used again on a biscuit barrel, pattern number 3499, and the handled vase, pattern number 3522. It must have been a popular illustration to appear 3 times in so short a period, or else it fitted the pot shapes well. The next pattern number, 3470, shows Puck from the very popular Midsummer Night's Dream, with the words, Puck, or Robin Goodfellow. This mischievous sprite or fairy was called Robin Goodfellow in the local Warwickshire area, and is a reference by Shakespeare to his home county roots and folklore. Puck is the servant of Oberon, king of the fairies. The reference is from Act 2, Scene 1. On the reverse is another spirit of the ethereal world, Ariel, who Prospero grieved from his captivity in a pine tree's trunk in the Tempest. Ariel is his servant and is finally freed at the end of the play when Prospero gives up his magic powers. Ariel is shown riding on a bat, and the reference is Act 5, Scene 1. The small vase with pattern number 3471 from Hamlet shows on one side poor Yorick, the king's late jester, in somewhat better health, as Hamlet knew him when he was a small boy. And the gravediggers on the other side with the legend, "They hold up Adam's profession," from Act 5, Scene 1. These illustrations are used again on a biscuit barrel, pattern number 3498. And on this large bowl with the pattern number 3506. As the previous Elsinore Castle illustration was too large for the space on the bowl, Glamis Castle from Macbeth was used. Interestingly, it appears that all the biscuit barrels have continuous pattern numbers despite their illustrations. We do know that there are other unrecorded intarsia pieces, including this vase, one of a pair, with Antony and Cleopatra. It is difficult to know which scene is depicted. The owner of the vase had it in store for some time and was not able to help me regarding any further information. It was suggested that the scene on the reverse of one of the vases could be from Romeo and Juliet, the reverse of the other being flowers and maybe a castle. This pair are depicted in Knight and Hill's Warman book. From 1910, Shelley produced a range of pottery items with a honey glazed background. These ranges coincided with the 1911 coronation and the Festival of Empire. Perhaps Shelley's were trying marketable subjects, exemplifying Britishness, when there was an upsurge of interest in the monarchy and British history. So look through their records to reuse patterns that could fit into these categories. They had already used this format for an illustration of Falstaff and Mistress Ford from Merry Wives of Windsor on a faience-handled bowl with a Wildman backstamp. Several of these have turned up over the years. The shape is 507 and the pattern number 7611, dating it October 1909. The scene shows Falstaff in Mistress Ford's house, where he has tried to seduce her behind her husband's back. It is from Act 4, Scene 2, and he says, "Mistress Ford, your sorrow hath eaten up my sufferance. I see you are obsequious in your love." The illustration also appears on an American jug with the Wildman backstamp. The rest of the Shakespeare range so far found have reused the transfers from the Intarsio series and have all used the same pattern number 7665 listed in the pattern books as Shakespeare subjects. Hamlet and Elsinore have been used on this tankard, shape 550. Macbeth is on this handled candlestick, shape 114. Our old friend Dogberry and the First Watch appear on a number of shapes, including a cup, saucer, shape 555, and a plate, and a desk pen tray and covered inkwell, shape 89. All of these Shelley patterns have a copyright backstamp. I would love to find more of them. Finally, I would like to show you again the Shakespeare jug, to me a very beautiful object that encapsulates my love for Shakespeare and all his works. Thank you very much.